Okay, so it is 7:35 p.m. on Tuesday, July 8th, 2025. Good evening. My name is Christian Klein. I am the chair of the Arlington Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'd like to call this meeting of the board to order. Um, First, I'd like to confirm that all members and anticipated officials are present. Members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have Roger DuPont,
Here.
Patrick Hanlon,
Here.
Venkat Holly,
Here.
Adam LeBlanc,
Here.
and Brad Baranowski.
Here.
Good to have you all with us. Our clerk and zoning assistant, Colleen Ralston, is on vacation this week, so she will not be joining us. I don't believe there are any other town officials who are planning to be with us tonight. Then appearing for docket 3856, which is 63 Chester Street, Rajiv and Caitlin Ram, or their contractor. Are either of you on? I need to check back with them in a minute. And then for 36 Glen Avenue, Jack Ajoyan and Leslie Mahoney. I see you here. It's good to have you with us. So tonight's meeting of the Arlington Zoning Board of Appeals is being conducted remotely, consistent with the bill signed by Governor Healy on March 28, 2025, which extended temporary provisions pertaining to the open meeting law to June 30th, 2027. The extension of these provisions allows public bodies to hold their meetings remotely by providing live, adequate alternative means of public access to the deliberations. This meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast by ACMI. Members of the public who are participating via Zoom and who wish to offer public comment should be aware that they will be asked to provide their full name and address so that a complete public record of the meeting can be taken in accordance with state law. All participants of this meeting are advised that people may be listening to the meeting without offering public comment, and those people are not required to identify themselves. Any votes taken at this evening will be conducted by roll call. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. As chair, I reserve the right to take items out of order in the interest of promoting an orderly meeting. As the board will not be taking up any new business at this meeting, as chair, I waive the reading of the land acknowledgement. So tonight, in order to expedite the hearing, I was going to take the two items in reverse order. I was going to take Chester Street first, but we'll ask again if Rajiv or Caitlin Ram are here, or are their contractor. Seeing none of them being here, we will come back to them second. So before opening tonight's meeting for public hearings, ground rules for clear and effective conduct of tonight's business. After I announce the agenda item, I will ask the applicant to introduce himself or themselves, make their presentation to the board, then request that the members of the board ask what questions they have on the proposal. After the board's questions have been answered, I'll open the meeting for public comment. At the conclusion of public comment, the board will deliberate and vote to either continue or close the public hearing. All votes will be conducted by a roll call vote. The final vote on any matter before the board will be taken at a subsequent meeting once the written decision has been drafted and provided to the board. The decision will then be filed with the town clerk, starting the 20-day appeal period under state law. After that time, the applicant may proceed with their building permit. However, under state law, no decision granted by this board shall take effect until a certified copy of the final decision has been filed with and recorded at the Middlesex South Registry of Deeds in Cambridge by the applicant. So with that, I will go to our agenda for this evening. We will go ahead to item number 3, which is docket 3852, 36 Glen Avenue. This is a continuation of a hearing that has been open for a couple of sessions. And with that, I will ask Ms. Mahoney if she could go ahead and introduce herself and provide us with any updates.
Hi there. Good
Hello.
evening. I will share my screen.
Okay, do you have permission? You do.
I do. Excellent. Okay.
Fine.
We wanted to start this evening with where we sort of ended last time, which is with this plot plan. It's been changed slightly. We have the existing unit 1 and we have unit 2, which is 30 by 38. And we've changed a little bit the open space, allowing for more open space in the front by making it trapezoidal. So we now have 1,281 square feet in the front. And then in the rear, we just decided to put the open space along the rear property line in that it allowed us to get rid of any retaining walls, any type of berm along the rear. And it's the easiest to do grade-wise. I'll show you the grading plan. It really just changes the site as little as possible. So I think it's in keeping with the existing grade and is, really the best way to go. With that, I'll show you the grading plan. It's a little smaller. And can you see these red dot lines, dashed lines in here? I know they're very faint. I'll try to enlarge this portion of it. Essentially, this is where the open space is for Unit 2. And we're just really creating a flatter area towards the middle of this space so that we can get the 8% grade. It all still flows towards the low point on the site, and there's very minimal disruption to the rear. The only other adjustments to grade are where the driveway enters here, and we have steps going up, and there's the existing wall right here that separates the existing parking from essentially the road over here. But that's all now going to be open space above the wall and the driveway below. So those are the only adjustments to grade, and no retaining walls back here at all. Unit 2 just shows those plans as we had seen before. I did want to mention that the current overlap on this plan as we had it, I'm sorry, I did make one small adjustment in that this unit was slid forward about 6 inches to meet the setback line. It wasn't quite on the setback before, and so it was slid ever so slightly forward. So it gives us an overlap of 23 feet, 1 inch, and that is 76.9% of the whole. You had also asked us to look at what 82% would look like. So this is an 82% version. In this version, we basically keep the structure similar, sliding it ever so slightly forward and just notching it at this front corner in order to meet the setback line. And 24'9" is overlapping, and that is 82.5%. But the structure itself remains the same except for this less than 4 square foot notch. Yeah. Let me see what else is up here. Some of the calculations changed ever so slightly, and so the calculations have been redone for permeability, average grade at Unit 2, which is still showing, operating such that the cellar does not count as a story. And these were the elevations for the, I'm sorry, that's not the right one. The elevations for the notched version are here. Let me move everybody out of the way. And so the way that is accomplished is just by notching that front corner. And so that rear 2 feet has a slightly lower ridge as it steps down. And you can see that on the front elevation here, that piece that is slightly lower than the main part of the house. And then I know that Jack has a few things to present as well.
Allowed to share. I guess we can talk about
There you go.
the setbacks first. I mean the building overlap first. Can everyone see my screen? So as a request from last week's or 2 weeks ago's call, I went ahead and looked at thank you, Colleen, by the way, for providing the drawings here. But I looked at Park and Exeter. The overlap on these two buildings was 68.7% and 74.3% respectively. Franklin was at 82, and I think this might be a little bit off than the number you just gave, Leslie, but I think we're right around 76% at the proposed setback without the notch, which was the plans that we submitted 2 weeks ago. So I think we're within the range of what's been previously allowed, and would be substantial. Any questions here? Okay. Moving on, there was another request to show a by right plan. And so this is something we scoped, and looking at this entire area could be the footprint of the home, which would be limited by the 35% rule of the 35% max coverage of the lot size. And at 10,019 square feet, we could get about 3,507 square foot footprint. By doing this, we could also put a retaining wall on this back left corner and create all this open usable space. And with about 3,011 square feet of open usable space in that backyard, we could build up to 10,370 square feet of GFA. The house itself, would be imagined such that maybe we could get like 4-car garage down the road here. And it would be a little bit lower, somewhere between the current ridge and the proposed ridge of the existing. This is kind of like an overlap of what the building envelope would look like from the side compared to the proposed. And so this is just showing, as existing, we have 0 open usable space. And I guess that was all just kind of grandfathered in. Special permit, we would have 2,686, allowing us up to 8,953 square feet of open usable space. We're only proposing about 7,237 of that. And the max coverage would only be 2,271 square feet instead of the 3,507, versus a maxed out by right. Just to show kind of visually what that kind of looks like, this is the special permit approach. This would be our by right. And this is the blue is basically the by right footprint of what maybe a modern odd shaped kind of structure would look like imposed over the request for a special permit. Oh. And so I guess these are the two things we're considering, the special permit approach and a by right approach, depending on where we can get to in the call today. Hey,
Perfect.
Mr. Chair, I think you were speaking, but maybe on mute.
Thank you for that. Yes, thank you for preparing those. Uh, Given the heat, I have several fans running in my room. So I just don't want to have too
Sure.
much extra noise here if I can avoid it. Um, Great. Are there questions from the board in regards to what's just been presented?
Mr. Chair, I guess I just have one. I guess
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
more for either you or Pat or maybe Roger. Were any of the other properties besides the 75 Franklin that were listed in the comparison, were any of those other ones special permit requests? Or were those um just
I
as right ones?
I can take that
We
one.
definitely have had some that have come through the special permit route. Mr. Joyne, I think you may have some specific information.
The document Colleen had provided me for 5860 Exeter Street had a special permit stamp on the drawings page.
Okay.
I
So
know there's one on Park Avenue that was similar, and I'm trying to remember other addresses where there's been an existing building that a second unit has been added adjacent to it.
okay. All right. Just wanted to see if we're comparing sort of apples to apples there.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Barnowski.
I was wondering if the applicant has had a chance to, or has been able to look at the abutters letter, this Saunders letter, that was submitted, it looks like, on July 6th.
I did not see a letter on July 6th, no.
Let me go ahead. I can pull this up here.
And my question, I guess, is on the second, Mr. Chair, if you could scroll to the second, well, I guess we should let the applicant have a chance to read it, but
Yeah, if you can scroll down a little bit, please. Oh, just at the bottom of the,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, okay, right there.
Go ahead and scroll down to the diagram here.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I think what I'm gathering here is just the kind of the definition of the duplex as an R2. And I think this has been kind of discussed over the past few meetings in which is it the addition with respect to the old house or the old house with respect to the new house in terms of the shared wall, right? Is it, and so
yeah, I guess I just wanted to make sure that,
yeah,
because to be clear, how we're defining common wall, because I mean, I understand your position is that we should define common wall, it seems to me, with reference to unit 2, right? That's kind of our reference point. This is obviously taking unit 1 as the reference point. And it strikes me that that is, a legally important difference just in terms of the definition of common wall going forward in terms of its meaning. And I just wanted to clarify that. I just kind of wanted you to maybe, after having looked at this, say what's wrong with this definition, just so we know that this interpretation that the butter is putting forward.
Well, I personally would say that the common wall is the wall that you are sharing. It's the wall that's in common between the two units. And so that is where the overlap occurs. So that's the percent that we are calculating of the addition, because that's what's being added. So it seems like that's what you would calculate.
So, but in the definition, it says, and it's still there, so I'll just read it. This is where it says duplex dwelling. A building containing two dwelling units joined side by side or front to back, sharing a common wall for all or substantially all of its height and depth. So it's referring back there to the common wall. So in order for substantially all of its height and depth to do any independent work, the definition seems to contemplate part of the common wall that's not, that's not shared in common, right? That's not completely overlapping. And so that's the question, right? Is the common wall, if you look at the diagram, is it just the whole vertical line running between the two buildings? Or is it the common wall with reference to just unit one, as this applicant or the butter is putting forward? Or is the common wall's reference just unit two? It seems like there's three different ways of measuring the common wall. That's kind of what is just kind of perplexing to me about just the way the definition is worded. It's not, to be perfectly frank, pellucidly clear about exactly what it's doing. That's
Yeah.
my view, at least. And that's not necessarily I'm not faulting you for that. I'm just trying to figure out what the definition exactly is trying to do, what the work is exactly trying to do, because it seems to me a little
Yeah,
opaquely
I
worded.
think,
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
ambiguous.
yeah, I think from the research I do, the language is drafted such that somebody doesn't just put like two tangential or two corners of a footprint together, right? In which only a minimal like corner of each building is touching. And that was some language that I shared in last calls. I can kind of refer to it. And I think I guess I bring that up from the perspective of what is the intent of the language? What are we trying to manage? And so what would be the intent of this? And I think from just the research I had done and shared last week, it was to kind of prevent things where just like two corners of a structure are partially touching, in which, yeah, you would have like two almost effectively independent structures.
Go ahead and stop the share here. Mr. Brownowski, did you have something further on that?
That's all for now.
Okay.
I guess, Mr. Chair, I would just like to clarify if we've been kind of iterating on the design
Yep.
for the request of the board for the past, several weeks. Have we been iterating to a wrong definition? Or is it the board's opinion that we've interpreted the definition correctly?
I think that's the primary question before the board tonight, is what exactly is how does the board feel this definition should be interpreted, and what does it mean in this case? But I wouldn't presume to speak for the board on that question at this moment. There were some questions that were asked of the board at the last session. I did have a long conversation with the town engineer. And the engineer also received a lot of questions from one of the abutters, and the response letter was posted to the record as well. But effectively, the Emerson is a paper street as far as the town was initially concerned. Both abutting neighbors have control over the street in terms of how it is, whether it's paved or not. So whether the owner of the property on Glen is allowed to pave the entire width without the approval of DCR is not a question this board can answer. That's a much more of a legal question, and it's something that the applicant would need to work out with the DCR going forward. I did ask the conservation agent about whether this falls under their jurisdiction. He says it is outside their jurisdiction. Even though water from this area does flow into areas that are under their control, because this is not within 200 feet of the Mill Brook, that they do not have that it does not need to have their review. And then we had a long conversation about water and sewer. So the town of Arlington does not have combined sewers. There's a lot of discussion over on the Alewife Brook about combined sewers in Somerville and Cambridge. That's not the situation here. What the town does have is the sanitary sewer, which collects water from the residences and sends it out to Deer Island via the MWRA system. That, because there are leaks in the system, because there are holes in manholes and things like that, when there is rain, there is more water added to that system, which unfortunately for this neighborhood, we saw some very visual instances of that during our last hearing. The primary problem for the town is that this neighborhood is the last section of the town before it connects to the MWRA system. And if the MWRA system backs up, that's when the problems start happening here. And the water that is coming is not coming from this neighborhood. It is coming from most of Arlington. And so in the engineer's opinion, the additional flow from this property, given all of the flow that's coming from the town that's causing some of these problems, is fairly incidental. And he agrees that it's not a good situation. It's something that the town has looked at several times, but that the addition of an expanded two-family or expanded duplex building would not create a substantial increase in the sanitary sewer load in this area. As far as the storm water is concerned, I don't know very much about it. We didn't discuss it to any great extent. Most of the stormwater in this area is either absorbed on site or is flowing on the land. The applicant has presented the grading plans. There was a question about whether the paving of Emerson could end at the end of the property. Did it need to go all the way through to Kimball? Again, the engineer felt that that was more of a legal question and one that needed to be addressed there. Excuse me. Then we had talked about the cellar basement story, which you've included calculations in your set. And then the last remaining question is this question about what it means to be connected for substantially all, and that's sort of really the last piece that's in front of the board at the moment. Are there any other questions or comments from the board at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Dupont.
so I don't know if I missed, but when we were having the discussion about what a as of right structure might look like, was there a drawing that accompanied that?
There was more of a site plan showing the outline of the area of the site that would be open for development.
Okay, so we didn't actually have a rendition of the way it would look.
No,
No,
no, just a
Not a rendering of
diagram of what's possible.
Because I know Mr. LeBlanc brought up the idea that we often do take into account the fact that if somebody did not get a special permit, they did have some possible other route to go by right. Of course, there are other sorts of considerations involved in that because I have no idea what the economics are, but it may not actually be feasible from that perspective, even though you might have a right to do it. But I was curious as to this question about, the substantial, sharing the substantially the walls between the proposed addition and the existing building. In the concept of the by right structure, what would the connection be in terms of the two units? Would those also be side by side? Is that what you would envision? And if so, what would the percentage be between the first unit, which would be brand new, and the second unit, which would be brand new? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think that would take some. Leslie, if you don't mind, I can answer that. I think that
Go
would take
ahead.
some. We've been ideating on what that could potentially look like. It could either be a side by side or a top bottom, roughly 5,000 square foot per unit GFAs, both with a 2-car garage along the long edge of adjacent to, or yeah, on the Emerson side.
So when you say top bottom and you say 5,000 square feet, how many, are you talking about 2.5 stories or
2.5
what?
stories, yeah.
So 2.5
Sorry.
stories, 5,000 square feet. So those would not be side by side, they'd be one on top of the other, is that what you just said?
I think they could go either way. I can pull the diagram up if it's easier to talk through that I had.
If you wouldn't mind sharing that again, thank you.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about this, but there's also the possibility of designing just a single family unit there too. Isn't that true? One large single family?
Yeah, I don't know if that was a question to me or the board.
Well, I think that'd be a question to you. Certainly under the zoning bylaw, it could be a single family, a duplex, or a 2-family house.
Mhm. Right, then it would be a possibility. So maybe to answer Mr. DuPont's question, I think what we've done here is we started off with we have our setbacks, but in order to understand how much GFA we could achieve by right, put a retaining wall here in the back left corner so that we can get some usable space that's nice and flat towards the back. And that open usable area would be 3,011 square feet. Sorry, 3,111 square feet. Based on that, so open usable area has to be 30% of the GFA. So the inverse of that would be 10,370 square feet of GFA allowed. The lot size is 10,019 square feet, and at 35% max coverage, we would be at 3,507. So with a 3,507, we could go 2.5 stories, up to 10,370 square feet. That would be envisioned to be potentially a more modern architecture. It could be top down or side by side. I think that would require some more architectural design detail to design work to kind of establish. What I had shown here on the right is just an estimated what that would look like sitting with respect to the existing structure, in which it would be a little bit lower, because the grade does drop in the back. But it would take up a much larger size volume of the land. So it'd go way to the back corner of the property line, about 27 feet away.
Thank you. That's gives me a better sense of what you were referring to earlier.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, what could we do? And that would be the bound. And so what I was just showing here is the existing versus the special permit request, where we have, based on the open usable area we're providing, we could go up to 8,900 square feet. We're going with 7,237. And we're well below the max coverage there as well. And I guess, just in terms of the backyard, it's not very usable right now. There's some pretty steep grades in the back of the existing. And yeah, there's no open usable area to begin with. So we're adding that back with the special permit request.
Thank you for that. Are there other questions or comments from the board? Being none, we'll go ahead and open the meeting for public comment. Public questions and comments are taken as they relate to the matter at hand and should be directed to the board for the purpose of informing its decision. Members of the public will be granted time to ask questions and make comments. Members of the public who wish to speak should digitally raise their hand using the button on the React tab in the Zoom application. Those calling in by phone, please dial *9 to indicate you would like to speak. You'll be called upon by the chair, asked to give your full name and address to the record, and given time for your questions and comments. All questions are to be addressed through the chair. Please remember to speak clearly. And once all public questions and comments have been addressed, the public comment period will be closed. So with that, the first name I see raised is Dr. Brooks.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Daniel Brooks. I live at 45 Kimball Road. Mr. Chair, I believe the proposal fails to meet the bylaw definition of a duplex dwelling, which I'm just going to read one more time here. It is a building containing two dwelling units joined side by side or front to back, sharing a common wall for all or substantially all of its height and depth, that is, in which no part of one dwelling unit is over any part of the other dwelling unit. The definition is very clear in its intention on the arrangement of the units as being in one of only two ways, either side by side or front to back. Overwhelmingly, the style of homes available to Arlington residents who are not in the top 1% of wealthiest families in our nation are rectangular in shape. The existing two-family home currently on the property of 3436 Glen Avenue is a rectangular structure. All of the abutting properties have rectangular structures. And furthermore, the fact that the definition fails to elaborate on other possible geometric combinations or shapes beyond side by side or front to back, along with a description of sharing a common wall, also suggests that the authors had a simple rectangular structure in mind while writing the definition. The proposed construction, being in the shape of an L, does not clearly fall into either of the two categories, since the buildings are merely orthogonal to each other. Moreover, as has been previously discussed earlier tonight, the amount of shared common wall area, far from being anywhere close to all of it, or even substantially all of it, is being incorrectly calculated through careful selection of the most favorable numbers and dimensions from only one of the two buildings involved in order to lend false credibility to their claims. There are many, many examples of buildings around Arlington that have been built as duplexes, perfectly consistent with the definition of a duplex as described in the bylaw. While the applicant managed to find a few rather questionable examples that are contrary to this clearly defined pattern, I would urge the board to view those examples as anomalous or possibly even as mistakenly allowed rather than as an intentional precedent. We should not be making decisions in this committee about interpreting the town bylaws in such a way that could have far-reaching consequences for the rest of the community. Instead, if we want to change the definition of a duplex to include non-traditional structural arrangements, the issue would be better decided with input from the entire town, and the bylaws should be amended to reflect the wishes of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person on our list is Vicky Crossan.
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
I am also at 45 Kimball Road, the other property that is alongside the paper road. And I have been sort of listening to these plans about repaving this paper road from scratch. It's not paved. And I was thinking about last time and the time before, Ms. Mahoney was so insistent that the proposal does not exceed 350 square feet of increased impervious area. And while that is possibly true, specifically in that box, were the applicant to pave all of this paper road, it would be like well in excess of that. You know, it's assuming it's drivable by one vehicle at a time. I'll give it 8 feet across. It's 80 feet from Glen to the edge of the current garage, which is already over 350 feet. If he did want to go all the way down to Kimball, which I would personally have a lot of questions about, as you mentioned, that's 220 feet. So you can see that it is wildly in excess of the 350. And I understand that the zoning bylaws are only talking about on this property, but I really think that if we're talking about the intent and the purpose, it would be, I just have a lot of questions about how that would apply, reading this in the best interest of the community. And just to clarify for my neighbors, this is with regards to requiring these projects that are going above 350 square feet to require a design submitted to the engineering division for the stormwater management rules and regulations. So the other thing I was sort of thinking about was that if, as Ms. Mahoney said, the driveways are going to be made of pervious materials so that they don't count in this plan, you know, it could be claimed that this entire road is going to be paved similarly with pervious materials. But looking at the slope of this road, I think it is very unlikely that a very significant portion of this road could be paved with pervious materials. So I want to know how that works. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our list, we have Julie Horvath.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hello. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I live at 37 Kimball Road, not at my neighbor's house, with my husband, James D'Amico. So in response to what has been discussed tonight, again, I am glad that my neighbor, Dan, reiterated the definition of the duplex dwelling, because myself just reading that as you put it up on the screen earlier, it was very obvious, just so obvious for the bylaw, for the zoning bylaw. So why we're having all these meetings is a little bit strange, in my opinion. And when he went through the definition of the by right, you know, the developer has the right, the owner, to develop by right a large home, you know, 7,000 square feet total instead of the 4,000 plus. Really adding more square footage would not impact the sewage, the already sewage and drainage issues that we have. I'm not sure how that was calculated and even thought about. It kind of felt, and I know this is not a sense of feelings, this is, we're looking at what's right, what's feasible, what's acceptable, but it really did, it did feel like a threat, like, gosh, if this didn't work, we could really build a huge house. And actually, when he put up the diagram of the length of the yard that would be with a house that would be 7,000 plus square feet, that aligned our fence. It was that's right over our fence. And it looked like it was right up to the property line. Again, we didn't have dimensions, so it was unclear. And also he with his definition, out of all due respect, with his definition, when he had mentioned something about, well, it's not two structures just touching at the corners. There are absolutely there are no properties in Arlington that just touch at the corner. So I'm not really sure where that came from. And then he did definitely use the old house with the new house, which is straightforward as two homes, not a two-family, not a multi-dwelling. So again, I just want to reiterate that we're very concerned about, we are not opposed to an addition at all. Everyone has the right to do an addition on their property as long as it's within the zoning, but the bylaws. Again, it's very concerning. I also had a question. I also talked to conservation, and they had emailed me saying that if the owner was going to develop part of Emerson Road, he would definitely have to get a special permit for that, which probably he already knows. But we also had question about what kind of surface he would use. If it was impermeable, could he do that? And what would that look like? I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then next on our list, we have Mr. Steve Moore.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve Moore, Piedmont Street. Ms. Crossan raises an interesting point about stormwater management. I know that stormwater management plans are required in certain cases and not required in other cases, and this is going to be a additional development on this property that is steep and perhaps majorly impervious. I'm not sure, but if they are creating a stormwater management difficulty, and I don't mean sewer at this point, I mean stormwater, what is the limitations of the development based on the stormwater issues they may be creating for the neighbors in this plan? And has there been a study of what this development, not so much the how big we could make it by right, but rather this that they're proposing here will create, in terms of a problem? I guess I'm asking you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. So just, was there anything further, or was that?
Well, I do have this question about, what if a development creates a problem for a neighbor and the neighbor has raised the concern at these sorts of meetings, and then the development happens and the problem turns out to be different or worse than what was talked about or whatever, what are the redressing that the neighbors can have relative to this? Or do they have to create in advance a stormwater management plan? I guess that's my more concise question. And secondly, if those pictures that we saw at the last meeting are true, and those are sanitary sewer overflows coming out of the road, and that stuff moves down the paper street and down towards the Mystic River Parkway, what about that? And does the design compensate for backing up sanitary sewers into its basement, the new design? That's all I had to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Are there other members of the public who wish to raise questions? believe Ms. Horvath has raised her hand for a second time. Ms. Horvath?
Yes, thank you. I did forget to mention, could I share my screen with you for 1 second?
I believe you can. I think so.
All right, hang on.
You may, but whether you can or not, unfortunately, I'm
Oh.
not very versed. So if it doesn't work,
Right.
let me know and I'll see what I can do.
Right. Hold on, sorry. This is right. So I was reading a little bit. Can you see that?
Not seeing it.
No. Okay.
Let me see. How do I do this?
That might be more from street stuff.
So the green share button at the bottom doesn't work for you.
Okay, let me try to find out. Sorry.
So if you don't see a green
yeah,
share,
I
then
did.
it might be under more.
I did try to share it. Yep, I'm on the share screen. Oh. Okay, there we go.
Here we go.
So I had found this on the website under stormwater. You know, it has to do with when you're doing construction, and I'm sure that the construction worker that's been hired or would like to be hired for this project, and also the developer or the owner, is probably maybe familiar with this, but there's a couple of documents on the town's website about how to go about doing this if you were to be able to improve a road, what you have to do about pollution, what you have to do about management practices, and all of that. So it's on our website. I'm not going to reiterate it. I haven't learned it word for word, but it does talk about the problems that we already have here at the end of the road. And again, all of us have been here for, 20 years, plus or minus. And we deal with this all the time. So just an FYI, I just thought that would be helpful.
Why would we go?
Thank you for sharing that. And that's from the
From the
this
town
town.
website.
Okay.
Yep.
Very much. Was there anything further? I think she's all set. Then we have
I'm sorry. You know what? My neighbor Butch, Arthur Edgecombe from next door at 41 Kimball would like to say something, and I know his Zoom is on at his house, but he's with us today.
okay. So just before he speaks, if he could just give his name and address.
My name is Arthur Edgecombe. I am 41 Kimball Road. I've been there for over 30 years. I've lived in Arlington for over 50 years. I did have a much longer speech to give, but I'm going to, in the interest of time, cut back. I would like to start by thanking Gina Sonder, Julie Horvath, Andrew Helga, Dr. Dan Brooks, and Vicki Crossan for all the efforts they've put into this project. When I first heard about this project and the large addition that was being added to Glen Ave, I got thinking, to me, a large addition was my wife putting up a 12 by 12 eat-in kitchen and a 10 by 10 back deck. That, to me, is an addition, not an entire living area with 4 bedrooms and 2 or 3 baths. That's a whole entire unit. I like that they throw the percent of 75, 76% around. Well, I'm a retired teacher, And if my students got a 75% grade, parents would be rather irate that they weren't getting a better grade than that. So to me, 75% isn't substantial. If I go to my mechanic and need an inspection sticker and he says 75% of your tires pass inspection, I'm not getting an inspection sticker. I have to go buy a tire. To cut to the quick, I would be more than happy to invite the board down to stand on my back deck and look out and see where this proposed construction is going to be built. Because I am the direct behind a butter. And I think all my privacy will be gone if this construction and the permit is allowed. Also, the garage that is going to be torn down has not been opened in probably, well, I've been here 30 years and it hasn't been opened once. I'd like to know what kind of creatures are in there. And are they going to end up coming over to my yard and my garage? Is the proposer going to take care of that problem for us? Never mind just the sewer problem and the street problem. Again, I want to thank the board for giving me this opportunity to speak. And 41 Kimball Road is open to all of you to come down and take a look at what's going to happen. And for the gentleman from Piedmont, I'm sorry, Mr. Moore, those pictures that Ms. Crossan showed us, the movies, those are real. Those happen quite often. And I don't think we need it to happen anymore. I could show you some really gross pictures that I have, but I decided to leave them home. But again, I thank you for this opportunity to speak. I just hope the board does not set a very bad precedent for future projects in a wonderful town that I, again, have lived in for 52 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edgecombe. Then I believe we have Ms. Crossan for a second time.
Hi, yes. Sorry to be the just wait one more thing person. I hate it when people do that. But one more thing. After hearing Mr. Moore speak about what happens if it ends up being worse off than we had sort of agreed that it would be when this decision was made at the board, I was noticing from the documents provided by Ms. Mahoney that it seems like all of the grading estimates and stormwater calculations were provided by folks that she had hired, and they all had nice, crisp, straight lines and pretty numbers that were nice and round on them. I'm not claiming anything, but if there ended up being more nuance to things just based on how calculations have been sort of, selectively applied in other parts, I am wondering whether the board is taking those estimates as truth, whether like we on Kimball Road should be hiring someone. I don't know what happens and what it means for sort of fair representation. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to address this hearing? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period. So we had several speakers, and a lot of questions. The ones that I had sort of started going through. So in regards to Emerson Road and how it could be paved and what the paving could be, honestly, that's beyond our purview. That would be with under the purview of the engineering division, and what their rules and regulations are in regards to how one can pave a street. And unfortunately, I do not know. I could, only say that I would hope that there would be, stringent requirements for how stormwater is handled on those kinds of streets. But I must admit, I do not know, because that's not something that we can't approve the paving of Baker Street. That's not something that would come through our board. There's a question about so the board had requested that the applicants show what might be able to be done by right. This project sort of fits in this odd piece where it is a very large addition, but it's not quite as large as one could do if one just demolished the building that's there and built something larger or built something else by right. And so we were sort of curious as to what that potential maximum size might be. And so that was the reason that it was presented. It was presented at the request of the board. And I don't think it was meant to be presented in a way that would pose a threat to the neighborhood, but the board felt it needed that honest assessment as to sort of what the development potential of the parcel was relative to what was being proposed. There's some other questions about surfacing and stormwater issues. If an issue is created, how is it resolved? After the fact, I would refer to the lawyers on our board. I believe it becomes a civil matter. It would need to be addressed in that fashion. Is that effectively correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And then, yeah, so it is this is a large addition. This is not the largest large addition that the board has had requested of it. It does create, it does propose to convert the building from a two-family to a duplex. That does not mean that it's not an addition. Technically, it's still an addition because it maintains at more than 50% of the original building, which is the way that the town defines an addition. So the existing building remains and the work becomes an addition. So that's why it's considered an addition. And then there was a question about consultants. So as a design consultant myself, we are all licensed. We have professional ethics and whatnot that we are required to sign on to. I would certainly hope that none of my colleagues in my own and my allied professions would not take that seriously. There is a possibility of error, certainly, but that I don't think that in most of the cases that come before the board does take the applicants, engineers and architects at face value as to what they're proposing, especially when the documentations are signed, which invokes liability on their part. So that was the majority, and then obviously the main topic still coming out through the hearing and especially through public comment is that this does not really does not meet the definition of a duplex, and therefore should not be approved as such. Which always brings the question back to the board as to how the board wants to look at this. So it is it's the question that has been raised time and again. I'm going to go ahead and just share this document from Ms. Sonder again. So in order to be a duplex dwelling, it has to have two dwelling units, which this would have, joined side by side, front to back, so they are side by side, sharing a common wall for all or substantially all of its height or depth, which is where the matter lies, in which no part of one dwelling is over another part, which is correct here. A duplex shall be considered as one principal building occupying one lot for purposes of determining yard requirements. So what does it mean to be for all or substantially all of its height or depth? In conversations with the building inspector, the term substantial is, in his interpretation, typically means 50% or greater. But that's the term substantial. That's not the term substantially all, which may be interpreted slightly differently. So I know that the board has been, per the diagram here, the board has really been sort of looking at what this area here that's in red, looking at that relative to the far end of the building that is connected to the other. And this diagram takes a different approach to it and looks at it, with the combined blue and red sections as it's substantially less. So this sort of gives me a little more pause than I may have had before, but I'd like to hear from other members of the board sort of what their sense is. I wouldn't want the board to preclude the possibility of doing, there may be situations where it is a duplex building would not just be two of the same things stuck together side by side, or front to back, but that there may be situations where it makes sense to have them come together in a different fashion that the different shape, and is that, does the board feel comfortable adopting that position, or is that something that the board feels we should take some pause on? So I would turn to the board for some comment on this point.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Baranowski.
it strikes me looking at this case that there really are, and I think I mentioned this to the applicant in passing at least, there are three ways, just looking at this project, that we could define common wall. Because it strikes me that common wall is the problem, right? We're trying to figure out which common wall is the reference point. That's at least one of the problems, substantially all being the other. The applicant, just so I'm clear in my mind, the applicant really is looking at it with reference to the unit 2, right? And that's where they're drawing the common wall from. Ms. Sonder is doing it from the original unit 1. But if we could pull up the building plan, a different, I don't know how to share my screen or how I would do it, but it's the site plan and everything that shows the overhead kind of look.
If you have it readily at hand.
I do.
Okay. I think you can share it.
Let me share. You got it?
Yep.
All right. Maybe I can just highlight too. Oh boy, this is very fancy. It's like I'm teaching. So it, oh no, I can't. Okay. Oh, here I can draw. Okay. Why isn't it that this whole wall from here to where the structure ends here, the common wall? Because the applicant's measuring it, if I understand them correctly, from here to here and saying, well, around 75% of this wall is shared with unit 1. Ms. Sonder is measuring it from here to here and saying just about 50%. But what strikes me about this case is, why isn't it that the common, whoops, I'm sorry. Why isn't the common wall just this entire vertical line here? And then we would just figure out whether substantially all of that wall is shared between both units, which I don't think it is, given just what I mean, this is just back of the napkin kind of calculation, just given what we know. But I'm not sure. I mean, my kind of first question is just definitionally, why isn't that the right reference point? Which is a little bit different than either what the abutter has submitted or what the applicant is focusing on here.
Yeah, I think as you were kind of explaining that, my mind kind of went in other places, right? It's like, what if I created a jog in the wall? Then it's offset. It's no longer common. And so then that I could basically have it such that the entire length wouldn't apply, right? But even when you were explaining it, you mentioned, yeah, this is the shared wall, this portion. And so intuitively that seems correct. And I think that's how we all kind of intuitively defined it in the previous meetings. It's a good point. Thought-provoking.
Well, I mean, I guess it can't just be that the common wall is just defined by purely shared, because if it's shared, it's always going to be substantially all, right? If you, I mean, unless you're taking shared to mean something less than being shared, right? I mean, that's the problem with the definition. Isn't just saying it has a common wall. The definition is saying that substantially all the common wall is shared, and so then we have to figure out, well, what exactly is the common wall and how much is substantially all of it. That's what I kind of meant when I was saying that I think that the definition is not. It's not as maybe drafted as maybe clearly as it ought to be. At least this is, again, I'm not speaking for the whole board. This is my perspective on the board. But that's what I'm trying to figure out, because it strikes me in this case is you've got people define the common wall by reference to one or the other units. And either side, I mean, I'm not sure why why we have to pick one or the other. It seems to be the definition should be what guides us. And it's just, to me, not giving me enough to kind of get me all the way there. And I somewhat think that all the words have to do some work. That's kind of my starting point. And I just don't see a definition right now that either side's really putting forward that does that.
Yeah. I think the area diagram was interesting in terms of like that red outline, which would be substantial, call it over 70% of the building areas interfacing. But if we do go strictly by the definition of width and height, it's effectively all of the height, because the apex of the building is completely shared. And then it's substantially, at 76%, let's call it shared wall on the width. Yeah.
Well, I'll let other members of the board chime in, because this is, I don't want to monopolize them. This is just kind of what's, I guess, where I am on thinking this issue through. And I'll stop my share so that way others can share if they want.
Thank you for that. Members of the board,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dupont.
So I think what Mr. Baranowski just did was helpful. And so when I started thinking about this a little bit earlier during this session, I realized that one of the things that's gotten us where we are is we're starting out with a large addition, right? And so and as you pointed out, we've had additions which were larger than this. I don't recall exactly where they were, what they were. But when you have a large addition, by definition, we're not requiring anything about the shared wall, because a lot of times it's a single family and we're just seeing an addition to a single family. So that issue doesn't present itself. Where we sort of run into this quandary is where we now say, okay, well, we've got an addition which doesn't in and of itself require anything about what percentage of the walls, if it's going to be offset, if it's going to be a jog, if it's going to be an L shape, has to be shared with the main structure. And it's when we get to this, okay, well, what is this now? What are we calling it? We're calling it a duplex. And as Mr. Baranowski was sort of going through and marking up that plan, I start leaning toward the idea that, common wall and shared wall are not the same thing. To me, shared is that portion of the wall that the new structure shares with the existing structure. So that's shared. Whereas common strikes me as more the entire length of the existing wall in the existing structure. And so if if I'm looking at it from that perspective, that phrase substantially all or substantially all feels like it takes on more meaning, because I'm considering the entire wall in the existing structure, and it's a lot easier for me to visualize what would be all or substantially all of the connection. I don't want to use the wrong word, but it's easier for me to visualize how that second unit fits in, snuggles up against the first building, and whether it shares all or substantially all. And if I look at it that way, this does not seem to me to meet that definition. And so I tending to, head in that direction right now. The other thing, if I can, and I know this isn't what we're on, it's a concern to me when we talk about the idea of the paving of Emerson. And I wonder, and I know it's not within our purview to make decisions about whether it should be paved, can be paved, what have you, but am I right in understanding that in order for the proposal as it's been presented to be built, that street effectively has to be built?
So the way it's drawn, it has to be built, but there's space, I believe, along the that you could put a driveway in that would effectively, go down that face of the building and turn in. I mean, certainly that would need to be confirmed with the building inspector, but I believe that one would be able to create a driveway that would not necessarily require the paving of the street, but it would not be ideal, obviously, in terms of the site layout.
Because I'm concerned about what would happen to the neighbors if in fact that is paved, and then there is this stormwater runoff. And I realize that that's, again, not within our purview here tonight, but I do think that if we knew for sure what that would look like, if it were paved, what the calculations would be for runoff, how it would affect the people on Kimball, that would make it a lot easier for me to digest this whole presentation. And, and I think the point that was raised by one of the neighbors about, well, what are those calculations that have been made or accepted by us, even though it's not part of the petition necessarily. I do have a concern about that, that's all. So those are my two comments, one about the shared versus common, and then one about the street and concern about the runoff.
Mr. Holly or Mr. Blank, if you have.
I guess my thoughts are, I've been thinking about it in a different way previously, but I am swayed by what has been discussed tonight in terms of that, and some further research I've sort of been doing on the side as we've been discussing. And I think I'm leaning towards that. The common wall is that whole length of the wall of the existing structure and the proposed addition. But on the other side, I also agree with your previous statement, Mr. Chair, about I want to also take into account in how we're talking about this of how we don't restrict design for a structure, because I don't think that's the full intent of a zoning code, is still to allow for design professionals to design structures, but within certain boundaries. And I don't know. I guess I'm still sort of torn on how we're gonna deal with this. Don't have my thoughts all together yet.
Anything else from the board? Um,
Mr. Chair,
yes. Mr.
could I just
Marinowski.
ask a question, clarifying question for the
Sure.
architects on the board?
Please.
So, Mr. LeBlanc just referenced, and the chair also did, not wanting to hem in designs moving forward and however we interpret this. And I, I give deference to that, not being an architect myself. And as you saw, my handling of the PDF being barely able to handle PDFs, and that's something lawyers are supposed to be able to do. So, my question is this: with full acknowledgement that it's difficult to imagine all the ways in which we could be hampering design going forward. If we were to think of the common wall, if we did think that the best interpretation of common wall here was the full length, I guess I just am wondering what would the design, what are some of the ways in which this design would be altered? What are ways in which we would be concerned about the way it'd be altered? I'm just trying to think through a little bit more about the design aspect of the problems, because I'll be fully honest. I've just been more focused on what exactly these words mean, feeling more comfortable in that
Right.
space.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to decide that the common wall is the wall, from the farthest, the wall that is a portion of which is shared, and the common wall is from the full extent of that wall past the, from the front, very front, in this case, or side to side, from the very front to the very back. Then you're basically requiring that whatever that second unit is, that it be in a lot of ways substantially similar to the first unit. You couldn't, as in this case, like turn it 90 degrees and have it go sideways. That would not be considered appropriate. You would need to have it be more uh, sort of more proportional to the first. It could be, slid back by 25% of the dimension, and so that 25 on the opposite end is hanging off, and then you've got 50 in the middle that's together. Like, we might be able to, that might be common at that, that might be a way to think about it. But it also, that it makes it much more, there's much less, in a site like this that's not just a straight rectangle, where it has a different shape, like hemming the addition in so that it can't take advantage of that shape, and to be in a, be done in a manner that, potentially has less impacts than it might otherwise have if it was, needed to be more, be sort of more orthogonal, is a little tricky. And also, if it's side by side, you're also now you're getting into the point that you've got this long portion of the building in the middle that has no access to sunlight. And the design that's proposed here, a good portion of the building has exterior wall, has access to light, has access to ventilation. Whereas, as you can imagine, a townhouse is sort of the ultimate example of duplexes that are added up. Those middle structures only have light at the very extremes, and there's nothing in the middle. So in my my sort of personal sense of this, I very much like the solution that the applicants are proposing. I think it really addresses the site well. I think it does the conversion from two-family to duplex is something that's happening all over town. Duplex houses are much more in demand than two-family houses at the moment. And I'm not overly concerned about the size of the addition, especially relative to the size of the lot. I think it's the lot is substantially, it's 2/3 larger than the minimum lot size. It's a substantial lot. And so having a substantial house on a substantial lot, I think is quite appropriate. But the problem that we're keep getting dragged back to is, by the way that the definition is written in the bylaws, can we consider this a duplex? Despite the fact that it does, in my mind, it checks all the boxes for being an appropriate response to the site and the existing building and what the owner is attempting to do. I am finding myself at towards the end of this meeting being much more concerned about this question of the substantiality of the connection between the two, and that being a term that we're stuck with because of the zoning bylaw. One of the members of the public had sort of raised the question that sort of making new policy is not the purview of the zoning board. It's the purview of town meeting. And I absolutely will ask town meeting to define what a common wall is for next when town meeting meets in the spring. We probably also want to take another whack at what a duplex might be. But I given the sort of the sense that I'm hearing from the board at the moment, and so the testimony we've received over these past few hearings, it is sounding more and more like this question of the substantial connection really is becoming something that is going to hinder the board's ability to find in favor of the applicant on this application, despite everything else seemingly meeting the requirements for a large addition. And so at this point, I guess I would go back to the applicants as to sort of what I know this process has been dragged out a bit. And we're now sort of coming to a point where we were not at the start. And, I feel, badly that our opinion is changing, but by the same token, I would be interested in your sense as to if given the opinions expressed by the board this evening, what your preference would be at this stage, if you want the board to, if you want some time to think about how you might want to proceed. Do you want the board to move forward to a vote? What is your sense?
Well, I just have a question.
Yes.
Given that Jack found other properties that were approved with less substantial common walls, how is it that this is the stumbling block we are running into, but other projects have not?
So I think what we are, the way that the other, so certainly the Franklin Street project, there was sort of a common wall between the two houses that was the sidewall of the garage with the second floor above, and that was substantially the same wall on both sides. The building did step out beyond that after the width of the garage, but that piece of common wall had a very high percentage of being common. The other one, I want to say, was it Emerson Road was the other one, or is Emerson the side street here? And I'm just getting them confused.
There was Park Street and what, Essex?
Essex, thank you. So in both of those cases, because the additions are effectively running in the same direction, the fact that they have the common wall is very limited in terms of the area it covers. The issue here, and this is the part that sort of gets at me because it really sort of limits the way you can actually connect duplexes, which I agree there should be some degree of, there should be certain requirements, but the way that it's being done, being proposed here to me feels very acceptable, but I don't know if it necessarily meets the definition because the common wall has to be that full length of wall from the very front to the very back. And when you take that whole length into account, there's only, that percentage drops substantially because it's not just the shared portion of the wall. It has to be the wall that's in common, and that wall that's in common runs the full length of the building. Because if, as was pointed out earlier, if we just take the portion that's between the two and call that the common wall, it's effectively 100% all the time because it's the part that the two, if we limit it to the part that's really touching. So my feeling, and I certainly encourage any other members of the board to speak up if they feel differently. The more I think about this, I'm feeling that the connection between the two buildings is the two halves of the building is not substantial, or is not substantially all of the common wall. I think it's a very reasonable connection, and I think it's a very positive development. But on this one point of this one definition in the zoning bylaw, I think we're running into trouble.
I'd like to maybe recap and add some notes. Can we all agree that by the definition, if we're going to go total width, does that mean that we would be substantially all of the height?
What's that?
It's
I didn't
substantially
follow that
all the
question.
height and width, right? So there, if we break it down, how
Yep.
how would we define the height? Would we be at 100% or would we be at like 90%?
So the wall would be the exterior wall, it wouldn't follow the roof.
The wall would be the exterior wall, it would not follow the roof. So it would be
So where that eave line on the existing
Eave to eave.
building, like it would be below that line.
okay.
Let me go back
So
and share
eave to
this
eave.
again.
So are we thinking of this three-dimensionally or just two-dimensionally in plan as a shared wall?
So I think we're thinking of it. That is a very, very good question.
If you think of it three-dimensionally and you build something much smaller than the original, then it wouldn't be allowed.
Right.
It encourages you to build something as large as the original if it's three-dimensional,
Right.
if it's height and width.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think, like, if you had, so as you have here an existing 2.5-story structure, if you were to build a 1.5-story adjacent to it, that was was more than 50% of the width of the building, but not more than 50% of the common wall area, would that meet the definition?
Yeah, and if the grade were dropping the other direction and this grade were dropping down, then it's very difficult to get
Yeah.
substantial in terms of height.
I mean, I think I could be persuaded that if it was, if it was greater than 50% of the length of the wall, and that there, that changes away from something that might make it less than 50% of the actual area, but that was being driven by topography or something of that nature, I think that could make an argument that it is, it would be a substantial connection. The continuation of that question, though, is would it be considered all or substantially all of its height and depth? Which is what the definition actually says. So and unfortunately it's a judgment call in a lot of ways.
Yeah, thanks for that. Let me just maybe kind of play out the scenarios that are in my head. Just into the neighbors and so forth. We're not a big bad development company, just a small family here. When we bought the house, the owner of the house, their family had been there for 70 years. They asked if we were going to tear it down. We said no. I think that was important to them. We'd like to keep the existing structure. I think if we look at a single family home on this lot, it's not efficient. It doesn't work financially. If we look at meeting the term of a duplex and mirroring this thing's going to be a monster.
Yeah.
Of the neighbors requesting, the blue skies and so forth. It's going to dominate the frontage on Glen, and it's also going to be daunting from the backside. And it's not an elegant solution. It doesn't address, modern day living. We could go by right. But if we go by right, it's going to take way longer.
Yeah.
And for those concerned about the environment, we're knocking down the house. So all that wood, all that is scrapped. There's going to be way more noise, all that. Also, if we go with a side-by-side, we're going to have to dig out that entire front. There's ledge, there's going to be hammering. It's just significantly more work. This solution does take account, the proposed solution does take account into the slope of the grade. We're tapering the height profile down. The position of the house is in a place where we don't need to really dig out the earth. It's going to be minimal touches to the grading. This is a unique lot. I know there's been a lot of press about, setting a new precedent, but this is a unique trapezoidal shaped lot, which kind of encourages this type of design, especially with the grading.
Is there any way that you could effectively keep the building as designed today, but maintain it as a two-family rather than as a duplex?
Because of the grading, the stories don't line up.
They don't align. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That was brainstormed.
Yeah.
And so, given that, I don't think anyone wants a duplex there of a mirror image.
Right.
I think the by right is just going to be a longer process. It's financially more lucrative for us.
Yeah.
But it's going to take longer and it's a lot more work.
Is
And
there
so
no portion? Is there no portion of the I'm just looking again at the definitions of two-family versus duplex. And thinking about the garages. And wondering if there's two dwelling units, but is the fact that the two garages are side by side in the lower level creating a condition where part of one unit is above part of another?
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Mr. Baranowski.
Are you proposing with looking at the two family is basically if this was redesigned a little bit so that there was part of one of the dwellings was over one of the dwellings that would just knock us out of the duplex problem? I'm just trying to understand what the
Yeah, so I'm sort of looking at it, sort of rethinking and looking again at the plan here, where there's the two garages are in the one portion, which is effectively unit two. The first and second floors are unit 2, and the garage is unit 2. But the other garage, I think, is belonging to unit 1, and there's a connection at the basement level from the garage into the house. And if that's actually the case, then the duplex requires that no part of one dwelling unit is over any part of the other dwelling unit. But I'm wondering, looking at the plan, are we actually in a situation where part of one unit is over part of the other unit? In which case, this is not a duplex. This is still a two-family.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think I did look at that. In the definition of dwelling, it's a place to live in. It's for habitation. Garage would not be considered a habitable space.
Okay.
Yeah,
Before I thought that was a
I was just looking at the definition of a dwelling unit, and I think I would have trouble saying that the garage is a dwelling unit or part of.
All right.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a follow-up question? I was actually understanding your point a little bit differently. Generally, yes, to try and think about ways to get us out of duplex into two-family dwelling. I was understanding it as more of a question about whether there was any design that looked a lot like, basically a version of this design looked a lot like this, but there was some way in which there was actual dwelling unit space that was overlapping, if you catch my drift, in terms of just altering the design a little bit to get us out of that duplex problem into the multi-family, into the two-family dwelling definition. But maybe I'm misunderstanding you.
No, I mean, that was my concern was that, are we looking at is the plan that we're looking at today actually a two-family and not a duplex? Because of the garage situation. And I think as Mr. LeBlanc had sort of put forward, and Mr. Joyan as well, that it doesn't seem to fall along those lines. But if the applicant was looking for a way to reconsider this project and to possibly make some adjustments, that would either address the issue with the way that it is defined as a duplex, so that it is a substantially all connection, or if the applicant was to make it so that it remained a two-family as opposed to being a duplex, that those would be ways of reconsidering the project that would invite further review from the board rather than the board needing to close the hearing and possibly vote in the vote against the approval of the plan, knowing that when a board does disapprove of a project, then there's usually there's a time delay for similar proposals.
Yeah, I've thought about the two-family approach. If we were going to do that, the building would be higher, right, to match the levels.
Yeah.
Building would be higher. And we might come into issues with, based on how the lot is grading, we're going to come into issues with height and the existing building height would then come into question as a new thing. And so I don't think the side-by-side duplex is a good approach. The two-family with equal, levels wouldn't really work out. And so then that's a force into the buy rate. And I guess the board is, given the uniqueness of the lot and the consideration in the design, and the ambiguity around the definition of common wall, I think we're forcing ourselves into a poor design decision here. If we were gonna define it as the entire length.
Do you think you would benefit by having some additional time, or do you think that that the public hearing has run its course and you would want to consider different options?
What are my options?
So we can either continue the hearing, or we can close the hearing. If we close the hearing, then there's a few options. We could, you could ask the board for a vote on this. I think you can get a sense of the board's opinion at the moment, as to how a vote might go, on whether to approve or not approve the plan. You could request to withdraw, in which case, effectively no harm, no foul, apart from the time and financial effort spent to get to this point, but would leave you with, all your options open going forward. And if you ask to continue, then we just need to determine, how much time would you want and what would you be coming back requesting?
Okay.
And if you could also ask if you wanted to ask to continue, and you decided upon further reflection and discussion with your architect and others that it did not make sense to continue, you could always request to withdraw at that point, and then the board can take that up at a subsequent meeting.
Okay. I have two thoughts before deciding. It's more probably questions. One is, from a design perspective, theoretically, we could turn this existing design, the footprint, the three-dimensional design into a two-family, right? The only
Yep.
thing that's separating it from being a two-family and a duplex is the interior layout.
Effectively, yes. It gets complicated because of the fire separations and things like that, but that's a
Sure. Yeah.
issue.
And so, but given the grading, you know, that's troubling to do. And would take away from the square footage, the livability, and so forth. I think if you know, if the problem was with the shared wall, defining a duplex, I think I want to kind of go back to some of the definitions that I had pulled up from the town of Arlington. Well, based on the zoning research, and just pulling this up, and just to kind of question what the intent of the definition is. So I'll share real quick. I just want to revisit this. So this is what I shared last meeting 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And I think what I want to highlight and bring this to the front is this last bullet here. Or wait, hold on. Interpretation of substantially all in this context. The shared wall should extend for most or all of the full vertical height of both units
Mhm.
from foundation to roof line, or at least through all habitable stories. The depth, the wall should run along most of the unit's side or back wall, not just a small portion. The intent is to ensure that the units are truly side by side or back to back and not stacked, which would make it a two-family, not a duplex in this definition. And then, you know, here are some other guidelines. A duplex cannot merely touch at a corner or a single story bump out and qualify.
Right.
And this bullet is maybe the intent of the language of substantially all of its depth and height.
Mhm. So I think if you look at the plans that are there,
These are the Franklin plans.
yeah. So like at Franklin, I think the wall that's that 23-foot wide wall you've identified,
Right.
I think that is the common wall. Despite the fact that the rest of the building is wider, I don't think it's material. I think it's that 23 foot that's the common wall, and is, you know, so substantially all of that wall is in common between the
And so-
two. And like Park Avenue, or not Park Avenue, Park Street, it's effectively the same building in the rear, and it's offset by like 18 inches or 2 feet out of, you know, a 20-foot wide building. So that's a substantial connection. I'm trying to remember, there was one on Russell ages ago, but I can't remember.
So
But like
this is-
here on Exeter, it's that 2-story.
Yeah, Exeter is here on the bottom right.
Yeah, Exeter, like that 26-foot line for me, that's the common wall.
That's the
'cause
common wall.
Nothing else is in common.
Okay, so then a jog does define a separation of the common wall. And so if I take the existing proposed here, and I just create a jog in this wall where I bump out this, the square footage of this unit 1 by a foot, and then attach unit 2, then I would effectively meet that same requirement. If you followed me, I can schedule.
It's an intriguing way of.
Right. So I can make this a part of unit 1. And then bump out. Sorry, my banner's in the way. get out of here. I haven't quite figured out how to get rid of the banner. Oh, there
Yeah.
it is. I can just click and drag. And then I could bump out R2. And so this would be the shared wall, and it would be not much different than, sorry, than what we have here, where we have a shared common wall, and then there's a bump out over here.
I think part of the thing here is that in these other instances, the reason for the bump out, the bump out itself has some dimension to it. On Foster Street is because of the garages. In the Exeter case, it's to have the egress stairs between the two. I mean, I think there's some, bumping out 2 feet. I would, invite the other members of the board to chime in on this conversation. Bumping out just a foot or two in order to move the common wall.
Yeah, then you're creating language around what the jog definition of a jog would be, and the size of a jog, or the utility of a jog.
Yeah,
and there's
then it's really
design.
chasing the definition, doing something to try to affect the definition.
I guess my argument in all of this is we're at the point where we're deciding if it's a 2-family or a duplex. From the outside, they both look the same. So if there was a fence in the design to the neighbors or the board, the design arguably doesn't really have to change for it to be compliant if we, ran stairs across the two.
I mean, I think if you were to make a plan where you're moving where the location of the common wall, and you were to discuss that with the building inspector, who's the zoning enforcement officer, if they were to agree as to what is the common wall in that circumstance, then that would give the board a definitive decision as to what it is.
And that's a discussion with the building inspector?
That would be a Mike Champa question.
Mike?
Yeah.
Are you
He's
saying the common wall in a duplex or in a 2-family?
in a duplex. In a duplex. Because a 2-family doesn't have a common wall question at all.
Right. And then I guess to follow up, where would you guys want to see this structure for it to be considered substantially all? Do you have a number in mind?
So I think right now, if on its own it was to be substantially all, I think from the front of unit 1, so that wall that is common between the two, from the start of unit 1 to the back of unit 2, that's the common wall. And as such, I think it would I believe that Mr. Champa would say, as long as more than 50% of the height and width is in common, that it could be considered a duplex. I believe that, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he has often spoken that the definition of the term substantial is 50% or greater.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
If I
Holly?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was been struggling through the same definition there. So I kind of looked into the design guidelines, if there has been any approach there. I see certain aspects there that seemed interesting to me. It could help a little, but again, if we are to stick with the definition, I kind of agree with what you just mentioned. More than 50% would be what I would lean to. But if I can get a screen share for a second.
Sure. I think you're all set.
I think this is on page, I don't know. There is this option which says, which approach to design guidelines for a new 2-family duplexes do you prefer? Option 1, the shared wall between the garage here is the only portion that is shared.
Mhm.
It appears so. Again, I don't know if this picture is from our town or, this design guidelines is an illustration, has nothing specific to lean back to the definition, but there is an approach that is taken here as a guideline, that this is considered a duplex while the sharing is happening there and not in the front. And I just I design townhomes, and we all know that you try to not have a straight townhome, try to jog the townhomes so that you have this rhythm and some kind of aesthetics appeal to the instead of looking at a still wall, a straight wall, I meant. So there is obviously some guidelines as such to move the building and massing and natural light and all that. So what has been proposed, it meets that criteria. It's only now a matter of the board looking at it and considering, is the intent of the bylaw for natural light, massing and, is substantial, because when we say substantially detrimental is very subjective too, right? I mean, I was searching for substantial in the bylaws, right? There's no percentage as such. Isn't it more subjective and subjective to the board's opinion on how you define that in a way? Because I was going back to what you had mentioned, and then Adam added on to it, is that rotating this building would facilitate more natural light, lets us have more design approach, does not restrict. Yet at the same time, 50% is not too far off either. So we're struggling all along to say which one, if it is better of the two. I'll leave it at that. But just from it seems very subjective and is subject to interpretation by the board. Is how I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll stop the share. Again, with the caveat that this is these are recommendations, are illustrative purpose only. They're not meant to be
Okay, so to try to wrap things up tonight, I think if the applicant would like to think a little bit more through it, I think it would make sense to allow a further continuance. If that would allow the applicant to have a conversation with Mr. Champa to try to come to an agreement with the town as to what exactly the common wall would be, and whether it is felt that because the special permit that the board needs to grant is not a special permit as to whether this is a duplex or not. Our charge is this large addition meet the requirements of the special permit? So we need to try to get back to that. So I think if the applicant was to request a continuance, so they could have that conversation with Inspectional Services and be able to come back to the board saying, the Inspectional Services Department has declared that this is a duplex structure, or this is a 2-family or whatever, then it takes that question off the table. And it's not because it's not really what does that matter in this process. Really, we're just supposed to be focusing on whether or not it's a large general. I also think it would be very helpful for the applicant if they could have a further conversation either with the town engineer, or I don't know if they have, to get a better sense as to what exactly the process would be for paving or improving Emerson Road. And can you do what you're proposing to do? Like, is it something that actually can be done or not? Because at this point, it sort of sounds like something we believe can be done, but there's the question about the DCR having controlling interest on half of it. There's the abutting neighbors on Kimball having controlling interest on another portion of it. And the question of if you improve a paper street to the point where it's a private way, are there other requirements for stormwater management that kick in? And all those are questions that I don't have an answer to. But I think are things that you would want to have an answer to as you move forward with this, to figure out if it's going to create a problem for you farther down the line.
Sure, but those are not contingent for the special.
They are not contingent on
Okay.
us. Nope.
Okay.
No, we can. Yeah, I mean, the board could approve the garage, on that street, and it turns out in the end you have no way to improve that street. That's a possibility. And then you would need to figure out how to get around that,
We have looked
which may
into that.
involve
We
coming
have-
back.
Yeah, we have written correspondence with the engineering department that we can
Okay.
that road.
Okay.
The other thing I want to speak to was the what exactly you would like us to confirm with Mike, because we've already had the conversation with Mike regarding the shared wall.
Okay.
And his response to you is the same to ours, is greater than 50%. And so was your intent for us to show him our proposed
So-
design and ask him if that qualifies as a duplex specifically?
So I would want to have you have a conversation with him and to have a statement as to whether or not it meets the requirements of a duplex.
Okay.
Um,
And I guess that's what I would like in order to request a continuance, is just not a moving target of what we need
Absolutely.
to achieve.
Absolutely.
It's been inefficient. I'd like to pull up just and thank you for showing, sorry, I'd lost my track. Mr. Holly, for showing that design in the guidelines. I want to share one last thing. I know we've been going at it for some time. I'll be quick here. I think what I wanted to just kind of show is in terms of the jogs, right? Like this could effectively meet substantially all. This is all of the shared wall, right? But then we could jog out. And so things can get weird.
Yeah.
And I just, we could effectively create a long hallway here that goes 100%, and then, whatnot.
Yep.
We can,
Yeah.
if we understand what the requirements are and they're clear, we can design to them. But right now, it's not clear to me what we need to do in order for the board to approve this special permit.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, what the board needs is a statement from inspectional services clarifying whether the design you're proposing is a duplex or not. And what was proposed on the 24th and modified slightly for this hearing, the sense of the board is that it's not a duplex because it does not have a sufficiently substantial connection along the common wall. And that
And that's being deferred to inspection, building inspection.
Right, in his role as the zoning enforcement officer.
Yeah, okay.
It's their,
Okay.
that would be their determination. And then, given obviously there is substantial opposition in the neighborhood to this project based on, a variety of issues, particularly around stormwater, around the sewage issue, and around um, you know, the size of the project itself. Obviously, this site has been underdeveloped for a very long period of time, and I understand that this kind of a development on this property is going to have an impact on the neighborhood. But by the same token, the bylaws do allow for the expansion of properties in town, and the board, as a part of its large addition, needs to determine whether this is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the current condition, which unfortunately is something the board hasn't really gotten to really have that final discussion, because we've been so caught up in the question as to whether this is a duplex, whether we can even get to that question. So I would encourage you to take into account what you've heard from your neighbors about their concerns, and think about how you may be able to address some of that, ameliorate some of that, as you
I would
make
encourage
adjustments.
neighbor that has any concerns to please reach out and we can address the concerns. Similarly with
Okay.
like the tree pruning thing, anything, please reach out. I think my concern is that in the last call, there was an action for the board to define the definition of a duplex and the shared wall, and it seems like we haven't gotten to that. I'd like to just understand if we get the clearance from Mike that the proposed design does meet the requirement or definition of a duplex, that would be a green light for approval of the special permit.
So
Is that the last?
my understanding and my sense is that the zoning enforcement officer, their responsibility is to interpret the zoning bylaw. In this regard, that's their purview. And so I can have that conversation with them as well, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. But obviously, having a single person make a determination is a lot simpler than trying to herd 5 of us to a decision.
Okay.
So with that, I think Mr. Joyan, you're going to take another pass at the plan, looking, and then have a conversation with Mr. Champa in his role as the zoning enforcement officer to come up with a plan that either meets the definition of a duplex, or that that does something different, but that is something that would be allowed on the property, that would allow you to then continue forward. And also, I'll have that same conversation with Mr. Champa, to sort of outlining exactly what our concerns are and where we need clarity. And then again, I would encourage you to consider all the correspondence from the neighbors, and think about how you may be able to address some of their concerns, allay some of their concerns as we go forward.
Okay. Is that a request to formally address our concerns in the next meeting? Or is it just like on a case-by-case basis, or?
I mean, I think you should, the neighbors have spoken very strongly on specific points, and it's all on the record. And just, if they're, with what you're proposing, can you, are there concessions that you can make in your design that you feel would make the situation better in regards to the neighbors.
Okay. Yeah, I think the special permit is the concession. The by right would be, against the grain. I think there's a lot of conversation about Emerson Road. Emerson Road was a road to get to the garage, and it was paved before. It's in disrepair. We're gonna pave it again to get to the garage. We're not gonna get past the garage. It's just gonna be to access the garage. So it won't affect any of the abutting road to the neighbor at the rear. We've talked to the engineering department. We got the clear. There's no requirement for the stormwater as we understand it. We can double check with engineering department on that. I think, we're adding pervious area compared to the as-is condition because we're getting rid of that whole asphalt in the front, and the garage and the driveway will be permeable to the paper street. So we're actually improving stormwater calculations as far as permeable area. And so forth. I will review and make sure all the concerns are addressed and heard. I'd just like to clarify that there, from my perspective, I just don't want this to kind of keep dragging, and so I'd like to just bound that there would be no new requests in the next meeting, which will delay this another 2 weeks.
Right.
And I don't want to feel like that there could be no end to that.
Absolutely.
That would certainly impact my thought process and decision here.
Absolutely.
So is that to the best of your knowledge, nothing else to address between now and the next meeting?
I don't believe so. As long as what you're proposing is, is an addition to the building, that's a large addition, and that still remains a building, either as a two-family or a duplex. As long as we have clarity on that point, then the board can make a final decision on whether it meets the criteria for a large addition, as stated as written in the zoning bylaw.
Yeah, I do want to just maybe state that I've read all the letters. I also did not get the one from, was it sorry, where was it? There was a letter on 6, maybe by Gina Sonder, I believe. I did not get that, but I've read all the other ones. I think, and it's pretty wild what's happening over there on the road behind us with the stormwater and sewage systems. I do feel like the neighborhood has addressed their concerns with the town in addressing and fixing that problem, and I do feel that this project is kind of being the focal point for their frustrations of the town not addressing their complaints in the past. There might be more to it. I'm sure there is. But there's no requirements for us to address the sewage system of the town of Arlington to do this. So I think just like some perspective on some of the heat we've been getting on that.
So with that, would you like to continue for 2 weeks to July 22nd? Does that make sense?
Yeah, if there's no new issues to be addressed, and we just need to confirm with Mike that this does meet the definition of a duplex, then yes, let's continue for an additional hearing in 2 weeks.
Just going back to the board, is there anything else that you feel the applicant should consider?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Dupont?
I just want to make it clear, I appreciate Mr. Bajoyan's patience throughout all of this, and I do understand both sides of this, and when I say both sides, I mean his desire to get some clarity on all of this, but I don't want the board to be obligated to not come up with any other questions or issues if it seems appropriate at the time. So I just want to be clear that I would not vote to commit to not raising any other issues. I think we operate in good faith all of the time. And I think to the extent that you had said earlier that you didn't see anything that you could think of at the moment, I think that's sufficient. That should be a sufficient statement for Mr. Ajoyan. I'm not willing to go the next step and say, beyond the question about whether it's a duplex, we don't have a right to inquire further, because I don't think that that's something that we can actually give away anyway. So not that that's what Mr. Ajoyan was suggesting, and I don't really want to get into a discussion about that, but I just want to make my position clear that I don't sign on to the idea that if something comes up that we're not entitled to raise that down the line.
Mr. Dupont, that's respectable. I said, and I did phrase with the context of, to the best of your knowledge, it was not binding.
And
Yeah.
and I appreciate that, and as long as we all understand that, I think it's fine.
Mr. John, if I could go ahead and ask you to stop the share.
I didn't realize I was still sharing.
Right.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, so with that, I will move that the zoning board of appeals for the town of Arlington continue the public hearing for docket 3852 36 Glen Avenue to Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025 at 7:30 p.m. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Baranowski. So roll call vote of the board to continue. Mr. Dupont,
Yes.
Mr. Holly,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mr. Baranowski.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Mr. Hanlon, I can't recall if you are eligible to vote.
No, I don't think so. I missed the first hearing. I don't know that.
Okay.
I've been avoiding taking any votes on this case. I haven't voted before.
Okay. Then I will leave you as non-eligible. So we are continued on 3852 36 Glen Avenue. Thank you all for being with us this evening, sticking with us this evening. I am going to go back now to docket 3856 63 Chester Street. At the start of the meeting, the applicant and their contractor were not on the call, and I am looking to see if they have joined. Is there anyone on the call who is representing the owners of 63 Chester Street? Hearing none. Do we continue that? I think we do. July 22nd is going to be awfully busy, but I don't know that we really have much other option. Unless we wanted to hold the hearing without them. But I don't think that's Mr. Hanlon.
Probably a couple of questions that we would need to ask them, not very many, but I think that where things are now, there's some clarification. One basic clarification is just to get on the record that they actually have asked for a reasonable modification, which has never been done. So I think that it would be difficult to, we'd be better off having them determined. Somebody should call them. They may not have realized that they were supposed to show up again.
Okay. All right. So then with that, I will move that the zoning board of appeals for the town of Arlington continue public hearing for docket 3856 63 Chester Street until Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025 at 7:30 p.m.
Second,
Second. Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. The roll call vote of the board to continue, Mr. Dupont,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Hanlon,
Yes.
Mr. Holly,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc, Baranowski,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, we are continued on that. That ends our public hearings for this evening, which brings us back to the administrative items. So item 2 on our agenda is the written decision in docket 3855 34 Golden Avenue. This is the decision that was written by Mr. Hanlon, distributed to the board for questions and comments, and final version posted to the board this afternoon. Are there any further questions or comments in regards to the written decision for docket 3855 34 Golden Avenue? Seeing none, I move the zoning board of appeals for the town of Arlington approve and adopt the written decision in docket 3855 34 Golden Avenue, which grants a special permit for a large addition under section 542B6 in the zoning bylaw.
second,
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. So roll call vote of the board to approve the decision. Mr. Dupont,
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, that decision is approved. That's the end of our administrative items. So with that, our next scheduled meeting is on the 22nd of July. Flipping to that in Novus, we have 2 new cases, 164 Hillside and 351 Appleton Street. We have the continuation of 103 Thorndike Street. We have the new, the sort of continued, but sort of new application for 67 Foster Street, no longer as a special permit, but now as an appeal to the decision of the inspector. And then we have just this evening moved 63 Chester and 36 Glen onto that as well. So that will be another busy night, hopefully a little cooler evening. So with that, I believe there is nothing else on our agenda. So I would like to thank you all for your participation in tonight's meeting of the Arlington Zoning Board of Appeals. I appreciate everyone's patience throughout the meeting, and I'd especially like to thank Colleen Ralston, Mike Champa, and others for their assistance in preparing for and hosting our online meeting. Please note the purpose of the board's recording the meeting is to ensure the creation of an accurate record of its proceedings. It is our understanding that the recording made by ACMI will be available on demand at acmi.tv within the coming days. As I had said before, ACMI is a community resource that is funded through a fee that is on cable subscribers. If you have cut your cable like I have, please consider donation to ACMI in the lieu of payment through the cable service. If anyone has comments or recommendations, please send them via email to zba@town.arlington.ma.us. That email address is also listed on the Zoning Board of Appeals website. And to conclude tonight's meeting, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Moore,
could I make a brief observation?
brief observation. I need to add something into our meeting schedule for Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore's minute at the end here.
Oh, my very long nose. Mr. Chair, I just want to observe that you've got your work cut out for you to try and explain this to town meeting and ask me for a zoning law change. That was significant academic discussion tonight.
Well, hopefully we can distill it into a way that town meeting can understand and hopefully reach a good conclusion.
Good luck with that. Pictures might help. And I just want to say thank you very much for that brief plug for ACMI, because you're right. It serves a very important community purpose. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Moore. Do I have a second on our motion to adjourn?
I seconded it, or maybe I moved. I can't remember now.
You moved, Mr. Hanlon. I need a second. Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. With that roll call vote, yes or no to adjourn, Mr. DuPont,
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon,
Yes.
Mr. Holly,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mr. Baranowski.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, the board is adjourned. Thank you all very much for patience for a long evening. I hope we're closer to a resolution. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Night. Thanks.
Have a good night.
All right, everyone.